In the abyssal depths of the ocean, sunlight never penetrates. Here the world exists in permanent night. Pressure increases until steel bends. Cold slows chemistry itself, and silence dominates, broken only by the slow drift of particles falling from a world far above. Yet even here, life persists. Far below the reach of waves, storms, and seasons, a massive shape rests on the ocean floor. A whale, once a titan of the surface. A creature that crossed entire oceans, breathed air, and sang across thousands of kilometers. Now it lies motionless. To us, this would look like an ending, a body abandoned to time, a final chapter. But in the deep sea, death does not mean disappearance. It means transformation, because when a whale falls, it does not simply decay. It becomes a structure, a reef, a city. Over weeks, scavengers arrive, sharks, hagfish, crabs, stripping away soft tissue. Then they leave, and something stranger begins. Months pass, years pass. The skeleton remains, and slowly, impossibly, those bones begin to change. Scientists observing these sites noticed something disturbing. The bones were not just weathering. They were not cracking or dissolving naturally. They were being hollowed from the inside. No bite marks, no visible predators, no signs of chewing, just tunnels, chemical scars, and bone turning to dust. Whatever was responsible didn't hunt, didn't chase, didn't consume flesh. It waited, waiting for giants to fall, waiting in the dark, and feeding on the one thing nothing should be able to eat: bone. When a whale dies at the surface, it doesn't sink immediately. Its massive body floats, bloated with gases, drifting like a ghost ship across the ocean. Days pass, sometimes weeks. Eventually, gravity wins, the body ruptures, and begins its descent. A whale fall is not a simple event. It is one of the largest transfers of energy in the ocean, equivalent to dropping thousands of years' worth of food into a single point on the seafloor. As the carcass sinks, it becomes a moving signal, a chemical beacon detectable from kilometers away. Sharks arrive first, then hagfish, twisting into the flesh like living knots. Crabs, amphipods, creatures designed not to kill, but to erase. In a matter of months, all soft tissue is gone. What remains is the impossible part: a skeleton the size of a bus, bones packed with lipids, energy-rich fat stored during the whale's lifetime. And in the deep sea, fat is currency. For decades, scientists believed this was the end of the story. That bacteria would slowly break the bones down over centuries. They were wrong, because when researchers returned to old whale fall sites, something didn't add up. Bones weren't just degraded, they were excavated. When scientists recovered whale bones from the seafloor, they expected decay. What they found instead looked surgical: tunnels, pores, root-like structures penetrating deep into solid bone. No jaws, no teeth marks, no visible organism. It was as if the skeleton itself was being consumed from within. Even stranger, these patterns appeared only on whale bones, not fish, not sharks, only whales. Something was specialized, extremely specialized, and it had gone unnoticed. For over a century of deep-sea exploration, we had been staring directly at the aftermath without ever seeing the cause. If something was consuming bone, it should have been obvious. Teeth leave marks, jaws leave fractures, claws leave scars, but there were none. Whatever this was, it left no external trace. The feeding was not a violent end, but a quiet insurgency. It was not happening on the skeleton, where nature's scavengers leave their brutal signatures. The evidence pointed inward. It was happening inside it. Within the dense mineral fortress, a silent consumption was hollowing the very architecture of the bone. And that realization changed everything, because now the question wasn't what eats bones. The question was, what kind of organism can live inside solid bone unseen? It suggested a patient and microscopic world, an organism that treats bone not as a barrier but as a habitat. It waits in the eternal dark of the abyss, not hunting but inheriting. It feeds on the final, improbable resource, the skeleton itself. This was not a predator with a face, but a process without one, a ghost in the calcium. Most whale falls occur in a realm of absolute isolation, far below the reach of human experience. We are talking about thousands of meters down, a world of total, suffocating darkness, where sunlight has never penetrated. Here, the pressure is an unimaginable force, a constant, crushing weight capable of deforming steel and collapsing submarines. This is not a place for flesh and blood. No diver has ever descended to witness this process with their own eyes. It exists beyond the limits of our physical endurance. Our direct perception ends long before this depth. Therefore, everything we know about this hidden world comes to us second-hand, through machines. Our understanding is a digital translation, a collection of pixels and data points. Remotely operated vehicles serve as our fragile proxies, these technological avatars, bristling with cameras, piercing lights, and delicate robotic arms, descend on tethers of fiber optic cable. They are our eyes in the abyss. And when those mechanical eyes finally turned their gaze upon the skeletal remains resting in the eternal midnight, they captured images that challenged all logic. They saw something that should not exist, something impossible. What the ROV cameras revealed was both beautiful and unnerving. Emerging directly from the ancient bones were vast colonies of thin, waving filaments. They were a deep, arterial red, a vivid and startling color against the bleached white of the whalebone and the barren gray of the sea floor. At first glance, they looked like some form of deep-sea plant, a soft meadow swaying in a silent current, or perhaps a strange new species of coral, a fragile garden taking root upon the remains. The filaments waved with a gentle, hypnotic rhythm, a slow dance in the perpetual dark. But their most disturbing feature was their anchor point. They were not merely clinging to the skeleton surface, they were rooted deep inside it, emerging from tiny boreholes, as if the very marrow of the bone was sprouting this crimson living fur. But this initial impression couldn't hold. The brutal physics of the environment denied it. True plants cannot grow here in a world devoid of sunlight. And while corals build structures of their own, they do not dissolve and metabolize the solid calcium phosphate of a whale's skeleton. A shocking reclassification was necessary. These were not plants, these were animals. Yet, they were animals that dismantled the very textbook definition. They had evolved beyond the need for the apparatus of consumption. They possessed no mouths for ingestion, no stomachs for digestion, no internal system as we understand it. They were elegant, rudimentary threads of pure appetite. And yet, somehow, they were thriving. They were actively feeding, converting the monumental, enduring solidity of bone into the soft, waving stuff of life itself. These crimson organisms were officially described and entered the scientific record in the year 2002. This was not because they were newly evolved or had just arrived on the planet. They are ancient. It was because we, as observers, finally learned how to look. Our technology and our perspective finally aligned to perceive a mystery that had always been present. For over a century prior, whale bones from the deep sea had been hauled up, collected in dredges and nets, hauled onto the decks of research vessels. They were studied, measured, catalogued in dusty museum collections as curious artifacts of the deep. And every single time, the most important part of the story was missed. The true inhabitant was discarded, overlooked, or dissolved away unnoticed because the organism was never a conspicuous feature on the surface. It was not an external parasite easily brushed off. It was hidden inside. The telltale red plumes, its only visible expression, were fragile and detached during the violent ascent to the surface. All that remained in the collector's tray was the hollowed bone itself, a puzzling effect without a visible cause, a crime scene where the perpetrator had retreated into the walls. For decades, we held the evidence in our hands, but could not see the criminal. We had the hollowed bone, but we were blind to the devourer within. Ultimately, after its discovery, this spectral inhabitant of the deep required a formal designation. Science, in its tradition, gave this ghost a name, the Osedax. It was a Latin, cool and clinical, chosen to encapsulate its function. It translates directly and ominously to bone devourer. But this name, while powerful and descriptive, proved to be a label for the aftermath. It named the profound result: the hollowed architecture, the stolen marrow, the enduring structure reduced to a fragile shell. It was a title for the crime scene, but it did not illuminate the startling, almost surreal method of the theft itself. Because Osedax does not gnaw, crush, or chew on the bone like any known macroscopic scavenger. Its action is not one of mechanical force, but of biochemical stealth. The worm's true face is not a jaw, but a secreted acid. It employs a radical strategy. Its body extends a complex root-like structure that burrows into the bone's interior. From these roots, it releases a powerful acid that slowly, molecule by molecule, dissolves the hard mineral matrix of calcium phosphate. In a grotesque and intimate symbiosis, specialized bacteria housed within the worm's own tissues then convert the liberated compounds, collagen and fats, into life-sustaining nutrients for their host. Thus, the worm feeds not by brute force, but by a patient, internal secretion. The bone does not fracture under pressure, it simply liquefies from the inside out, its solidity erased by chemistry. The name Osedax speaks of violent consumption, but the chilling reality is a silent, metabolic dissolution. Osedax anchors itself to the colossal skeleton through a deceptive and invasive biology. It extrudes a branching network of pale, fleshy tissues that burrow like roots, penetrating deep into the bone's dense interior, seeking the rich fats locked within the marrow cavity. But these are not mere anchors for stability. At the microscopic level, cellular tips of these invasive roots, lies its true biological weapon, a sophisticated and devastating proton pump system. This specialized cellular machinery performs a quiet, localized act of chemical warfare. It actively and relentlessly floods the immediate frontier between living tissue and dead bone with hydrogen ions, radically and drastically lowering the local pH. This process creates a sustained, microscopic corrosive acid bath. a zone of focused dissolution right at the point of contact. In this self-generated chemical forge, the robust molecular matrix of the bone, the crystalline bonds of calcium phosphate that give the skeleton its enduring strength, are systematically severed and broken apart. It is a process of deconstruction so fundamental it renders the concept of chewing obsolete. The bone isn't fractured by external pressure, it is chemically unmade from within. Through this elegant, insidious alchemy, solid, mineralized stone is liquefied into a nutrient-rich organic solution. The impossible feast is thus achieved. The worm, possessing neither mouth nor gut, consumes its world by first dissolving it. The monumental is made fluid, stone becomes soup. But here, in the investigation of Osedax, we arrive at a final, stunning biological twist. The worm itself does not directly consume the rich nutrients it has so carefully liberated from the bone. Instead, housed in specialized cells within the worm's own fleshy roots, lies a vast internal population of symbiotic bacteria. These microscopic partners perform the final, critical metabolic act. The worm provides the brute force access to the bone and creates the corrosive chemical environment to dissolve it, while these bacterial guests feast on the resulting slurry of dissolved fats, proteins, and collagens. They are the ones who convert this ancient, mineral-locked bounty into usable organic compounds and energy. Therefore, the elegant red-plumed worm we see waving in the current is not the ultimate consumer in this chain. It is not the final devourer of the whale's monumental legacy. It is, more accurately, the essential infrastructure. It is the specialized drilling platform, the on-site chemical refinery, and the secure biological pipeline, all fused into a single living entity. The worm is a sophisticated biological vessel, a living drill rig and processing plant, evolved specifically to host and sustain the true metabolizers, a hidden, thriving civilization of bacteria that perform the alchemy of turning solid bone into sustaining life. The visible animal is merely the architect, the engineer, and the guardian of an invisible microbial feast. And in the bizarre, almost alien life cycle of Osedax, we find perhaps its strangest and most profound evolutionary twist. It is a tale of radical biological inversion, where our most basic assumptions about form, function, and gender are undone. The organism we recognize, the red-plumed rooted deep in the skeleton, is exclusively a female. And within each of these females, a second, more intimate colony thrives unseen. Thousands of microscopic males live permanently inside a single female, dwelling within a specialized gelatinous tube that lines the interior of her body. They are not independent partners in any conventional sense. They are a captured, internalized resource. These males never leave the protective, nourishing confines of her form. Arrested in a perpetual larval state, they never grow, never mature into complex animals. They develop no mouth, no gut, no independent means of survival. Their entire existence is biologically streamlined down to a singular defining purpose. They exist only to wait in dormant readiness, and then to fertilize her eggs when the time is right. They are, in essence, nothing more than living, mobile sperm packets, a veritable harem of minute reproductive drones, stored efficiently within the very body they are destined to perpetuate. While the female evolves into a vast, complex geological mining operation, the male is evolutionarily reduced to the purest, most minimal form of animal life, a sentient, parasitic genetic function. It is a profound reversal of our expectations, where the seen and the unseen, the giant host and the microscopic inhabitant, are locked in an inseparable cycle of survival, written not in bone, but in symbiotic flesh and single-minded reproductive purpose. The relentless chemical work of Osedax is revealed not as a final act of consumption, but as a profound and essential catalyst for life. As the worm's acidic roots dissolve the dense fortress of the bones, they perform a critical act of liberation, unlocking a buried geological treasure, a sudden enriching flood of minerals and long-trapped organic compounds. This rich, solubilized plume, a mixture of calcium, phosphate, and complex lipids, does not simply dissipate into the void. Instead, it percolates downward, permeating the surrounding seafloor sediment and saturating the barren, nutrient-poor mud with unexpected fertility. This sudden chemical enrichment, known in oceanography as a chemosynthetic pulse, creates a localized oasis. It becomes the foundational energy source that fuels an entire, cascading ecosystem. Thus, the immediate microscopic destruction orchestrated by Osedax becomes the indispensable first act of long-term macroscopic creation. The dissolved legacy of the whale feeds vast colonies of free-living bacteria, which in turn support dense populations of tiny nematode worms, specialized crustaceans, and other enigmatic deep-sea invertebrates. In this crucial role, the bone devourers are the unseen architects of renewal. They are the demolition crew that must first deconstruct the monolithic resource, transforming a single, massive cache of energy into a diffuse and accessible feast that can nourish a hidden, sediment-dwelling community for decades. What begins as an act of solitary chemical erasure ultimately blossoms into a sustained garden of abyssal life, proving that on the ocean floor there is no true end, only a continuous, elegant, and necessary cycle of transformation. In the absolute dark, destruction becomes creation. The survival of this entire intricate deep-sea cycle is tethered to a single, monumental source of abundance. Without the whales, without their titanic bodies concluding a long life and beginning their final, slow-motion fall through miles of crushing darkness, the elegant, hidden system unravels completely. Osedax, the specialized bone devourer, would have no substrate for its acidic alchemy. It would simply vanish, a brilliant biological adaptation rendered obsolete, a key that has lost its lock. Its bizarre life cycle, perfected over millions of years of coevolution, would become an evolutionary ghost story. And in its absence, the rich, sediment-based ecosystems it unknowingly engineers would wither. The vital chemosynthetic pulse, that sudden infusion of bone-derived minerals and lipids, would never arrive. The deep-sea garden of specialized bacteria, nematodes, and crustaceans that depends on this dissolved legacy would face a silent famine, their vibrant oasis reverting to a desert of nutrient-poor mud. The architects of decay would be gone, and with them, the foundation for creation. Thus, the whale is revealed as far more than an isolated leviathan. In life, it is a mobile, breathing engine of ocean ecology, stirring nutrients and moving energy across vast distances. And, in death, through the indirect partnership with creatures like Osedax, it becomes the cornerstone of an entire cryptic biome. Its massive skeleton is a keystone resource, a biological lighthouse casting a long, sustaining shadow in the permanent night. The existence of these abyssal communities is a direct, fragile consequence of the whales that swim, sing, and breathe in the sunlit world far above. Their thriving in the light is what guarantees life's persistence in the absolute dark. Osedax stands as a profound challenge to our most basic biological definitions. It systematically breaks the rules we have written for what it means to be an animal. It possesses no mouth for ingestion. It has evolved without a stomach for digestion. It lacks the entire familiar digestive tract we consider fundamental, and yet it thrives. It is unquestionably, vibrantly alive. This forces a radical expansion of our understanding. Life, Osedax declares, is not about a specific set of organs, but about a function, the relentless acquisition and transformation of energy. The worm achieves this not through internal anatomy, but through externalized collaborative biology. It outsources digestion to symbiotic bacteria and weaponizes its own tissue into a chemical mining tool. In doing so, it redefines the boundaries of an individual organism, blurring the line between a single creature and a living, cooperative consortium. It proves that life is a process, not a blueprint, a metabolic strategy that can flourish in forms far stranger and more ingenious than we ever presumed. After years, sometimes decades, the work is complete. The colossal feast is over. The last of the bone is dissolved, the final nutrients absorbed and cycled. The great skeleton is gone. The plumes of Osedax, having consumed their entire world, now wither and detach. Their brief, vibrant bloom of life, sustained by the whale's very essence, fades into the abyssal sediment. The female, her purpose fulfilled, and she dies. The microscopic males within her perish with her, but this is not the end of the species, for Osedax persists. Its larval offspring, tiny and drifting, were released into the boundless, dark water column long before the final bone vanished. They are out there now, suspended in the endless midnight. They are waiting. They are equipped with a profound, simple imperative to sense the next great fall, the chemical signature of death on a colossal scale. They wait for the next giant to complete its journey, for the next biological island to form from a descending shadow. In the perpetual silence of the deep, between one fallen giant and the next, Osedax exists not as a body, but as a possibility, a patient, living promise of decay and renewal. A drift in the cold and waiting for the darkness to once again give way to a feast